Well, you're not supposed to ask the question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What if Iran flipped sides? What if the same regime that made death to America a national slogan, the same Iran that armed Hezbollah, backed Assad, and played global spoiler for decades, suddenly looks west and decides it has no other choice? Sounds like a stretch until you see what's happening on the ground, because Iran is unraveling. Its economy is on life support, its allies are unreliable, and its people are fed up. Its future depends on something unthinkable: re-engaging with the very countries it has spent the last 45 years demonizing. Let's be clear, Iran is not some helpless state. It's a nation with enormous energy reserves, a deep historical identity, and a population of 88 million people, most of whom weren't even alive when the Islamic Revolution happened. But today, Iran is facing a triple crisis: economic collapse, strategic isolation, and internal rebellion. The rial has lost over 90% of its value in the last decade. Youth unemployment is sky high. And the middle class, the very force that once sustained the regime's legitimacy, is rapidly shrinking. Meanwhile, Iran's supposed lifelines, Russia, China, and its regional proxies, they aren't stepping up. Russia is bogged down in Ukraine and demanding cheap drones. China is signing oil deals but offering no real investment or political backing. Even Iraq is beginning to distance itself from Tehran's influence. Iran's regional strategy, the so-called axis of resistance, it's cracking. And inside Iran, the population knows it. The protests after Mahsa Amini's death weren't just about hijabs. They were about freedom, jobs, inflation, opportunity, life. And while the regime crushed the protests with brutal force, the underlying anger, it didn't go away. It's spreading. The streets are quieter now, yes, but the silence isn't peace, it's pressure. It's waiting. And here's where things get even more dangerous for the regime. Iran built its survival model on being the anti-West, on using resistance as a brand, on blaming sanctions for its own failures, while still trading oil through back channels and playing global powers against each other. But in 2025, that model's collapsing because the global system itself has changed. The US doesn't need Middle Eastern oil anymore. Global shipping lanes are being rewritten by security, not efficiency. And China's own economic slowdown means Iran can't just lean east and expect salvation. In other words, Iran is running out of options. And that's where the idea, no matter how crazy it sounds, starts to make sense. What if the West is the only exit left? Not because Tehran has changed its ideology, but because survival forces hard choices. Because the average Iranian, especially the under 30 generation, isn't chanting for martyrdom. They're looking for jobs. They want stability. They want freedom, or at the very least, a future. And the regime knows it, which is why quietly, subtly, we're starting to see signs of something deeper. Back-channel talks, energy compromise discussions, even whispers of a new nuclear framework. Not out of goodwill, but out of desperation. Because here's the bottom line. Iran doesn't need to become pro-West. It just needs to become functional. And in a world being restructured around trade blocks, energy corridors, and hard power, functionality requires access. Access to markets, access to capital, access to the financial system. And only the West can provide that. So where does this go? If Iran pivots just slightly, it could flip the balance of the entire Middle East. It would isolate Russia even further. It would shake China's Belt and Road ambitions, and it would send shockwaves through every authoritarian regime clinging to a Cold War playbook. We're not there yet. Don't get crazy. But for the first time in a generation, we can see the cracks. If you're done with globalist bullshit and ready for straight talk, subscribe to America's Geopolitics. Because in this episode, we're going to follow the story of a regime in crisis and ask the question the rest of the world is still afraid to consider. What if Iran is about to flip? Let's break it down.